Imagine standing in the middle of the Arctic. The air hurts your face. The wind cuts through everything. The ground is endless white, stretching farther than your eyes can see. Out here, a normal vehicle doesn't just break down. It dies, engines freeze solid, metal cracks, and help is hundreds of kilometers away. In a place like this, survival depends on one thing: massive machines built to cheat death itself. And today, you're about to discover the 10 biggest off-road expedition trucks ever sent into the Arctic. You might think you've seen big trucks before, but trust me, some of these are so extreme, so strange, and so huge that even hardcore off-road fans don't know they exist. And the deeper we go, the crazier they get. Stick around, because by the end of this list, you'll be questioning how humans ever thought these machines could work. Let's start with a giant born in Russia. Designed for places where roads are just a rumor. The Kamaz 6345. This thing doesn't look like a truck. It looks like a moving fortress. Stretching over 10 meters long and weighing more than 20 tons. The Kamaz 6345 was built for the coldest and most isolated regions on Earth. Siberia, the Arctic Circle. Oil fields where the temperature can drop so low that breathing feels dangerous. And here's the thing. This truck wasn't designed to visit these places. It was designed to live there. Under the hood sits a massive diesel engine pushing serious power. But power isn't the real story. The real magic is how this beast survives. 8 driven wheels. Massive low-pressure tires. A system that lets the driver change tire pressure from inside the cab while driving. Deep snow, lower the pressure. Hard ice, raise it. Inside, the cab is fully insulated and heated, warm enough to feel like a small apartment while the outside world tries to kill you. Some versions even carry living modules with beds, food storage, and heaters. Out here, this truck isn't transportation. It's your home. And when Russian oil and gas crews head deep into frozen nothingness, this is what keeps them alive. But if you think this is impressive, wait until you see what came decades earlier. Back in the 1950s, the United States had a problem. How do you move massive military equipment across frozen wilderness with no roads, no bridges, and no backup? The answer rolled in as the FWD-MM-1 Terra cruiser. This machine looks simple, but it changed Arctic transport forever. Long, wide, and riding on enormous balloon-like tires, the Terra cruiser was built to float over snow instead of digging into it. Each tire was taller than most people. The idea was simple. Spread the weight so wide that the truck barely presses into the ground. Powered by a roaring V8 engine, this truck could tow critical radar systems and communication equipment across terrain that would swallow normal vehicles whole. And that's exactly what it did during the construction of the DEW Line, a chain of radar stations built across northern Canada and Alaska during the Cold War. Temperatures dropped below -50 degrees. Winds howled nonstop. And yet this truck kept moving. No convoys, no rescue teams. Just one machine hauling mission-critical gear through the frozen unknown. It wasn't flashy, but it proved something important. The Arctic could be conquered on wheels. And the Soviets were watching. That brings us to one of the strangest and boldest trucks ever built. The ZIL E167. Born in the early 1960s. This Soviet monster looks like something straight out of science fiction. 6 massive wheels. A wide boxy body. And a presence that makes you feel small just looking at it. But what really sets the ZIL apart is what's under the hood. Or rather, under the hoods. This thing had 2 engines. 2 full V8 gasoline engines mounted side by side. Together, they produced massive power for the time, driving all 6 wheels through a specially designed transmission. Why 2 engines? Because redundancy meant survival. If one failed in the middle of Siberia, the other could still get you home. The ZIL E167 was designed to cross deep snow, frozen swamps, and terrain so soft it could swallow trucks whole. Inside, the cab was sealed, heated, and built to keep the crew alive in extreme cold for long periods. During testing, it traveled over 15,000 kilometers across some of the harshest landscapes on Earth. And it worked. The problem was cost. Fuel consumption, complexity. The ZIL E167 was simply too extreme for mass production. Only one was ever built. Today it sits in a museum. Silent, immense, a reminder of a time when engineers were willing to build monsters just to see if they could, but wheels, as impressive as they are, have limits. And the next machine decided to abandon them completely. Enter the Ural 5920. When even six-wheel drive trucks started failing in frozen wetlands and deep snow, Soviet engineers turned to tracks. Tank-style tracks. The Ural 5920 looks like a truck fused with a bulldozer, long, wide, and riding on two massive continuous tracks connected by an articulated joint in the middle. This allowed it to bend while turning, something critical when navigating unstable terrain. Its ground pressure was so low that it could crawl across snow, ice, and swampy tundra without sinking. Powered by a diesel engine tuned for torque instead of speed, this vehicle wasn't fast. It didn't need to be. It just needed to keep moving. And it did. Oil and gas companies used it to transport heavy equipment into regions helicopters couldn't reach. Some versions even had sleeping quarters and heating systems, turning it into a slow-moving survival base. Watching it move feels unreal, like a mechanical animal crawling across a white desert. And just when you think vehicles can't get more specialized than this, the next one proves you wrong, because the next machine on this list wasn't built by a government or a military. It was built by people who simply refused to accept that the North Pole was unreachable on wheels. Asterisk. The vehicle that proved humans could drive to the North Pole on wheels is called the Burlac. And unlike most of the giants on this list, it didn't come from a military factory or a government program. It came from a small group of Russian engineers and explorers who asked a simple question. What if the vehicle itself was the expedition? The Burlac looks like a machine from another planet. Shorter than the previous monsters, but wide, tall, and rolling on 6 gigantic low-pressure tires that look more like balloons than wheels. Each tire is so large that you could stand next to it and barely reach the top. The entire vehicle was designed to float on snow and ice instead of fighting it. And here's the insane part. It actually floats on water too. That's right. If the ice cracks, the Burlac doesn't sink. It becomes a boat. Under the hood is a modest but reliable diesel engine, chosen not for speed, but for efficiency and reliability in extreme cold. Inside, the Burlac is a fully self-contained survival capsule. Bed, heating, cooking space, storage, solar panels. Enough insulation to stay warm while the outside world sits at -40 or worse. And this wasn't theory. The Burlac completed a real expedition across Arctic ice all the way to the North Pole. No rescue crews, no backup vehicles, just a rolling home crossing frozen nothingness. It proved that Arctic travel didn't need to be huge and heavy. It needed to be smart. But while the Burlac represents a new generation, the next machine is a throwback to pure brute force. Imagine taking a massive industrial hauler and telling it to work where even steel becomes brittle. That's exactly what happened with the Crest AHT730C. This articulated Arctic tractor was built to haul impossible loads across ice and deep snow in places like northern Canada and Alaska. When oil companies need to move equipment weighing hundreds of tons across frozen land, this is what they use. The truck is split in the middle by a massive hinge, allowing it to turn smoothly despite its size. It rides on 6 enormous tires, all designed for traction on ice. Under the hood sits a powerful diesel engine built to start in temperatures so low that normal engines simply refuse to wake up. The cab is fully heated and insulated because out here, a broken heater can be fatal. And this thing doesn't just pull trailers. It drags entire buildings, fuel tanks, and machinery across terrain that looks completely flat but hides deadly cracks and soft ice. Watching one move feels unreal, slow, steady, unstoppable. It's not glamorous, but it's one of the most important machines in modern Arctic logistics. And yet most people have never heard of it. But the next one on this list, You've probably seen it in photos without realizing what you were looking at. It's called the Roligon, and it looks ridiculous. At first glance, you might laugh. Giant pillow-like tires, a stretched-out body, a stance that looks more toy than truck. But don't let appearances fool you. The Roligon is one of the most brilliant Arctic vehicles ever invented. Developed in the United States, this machine was designed around one idea: ground pressure. Instead of digging into snow and soft tundra, the Roligon spreads its weight so evenly that it almost floats. The tires are enormous inflatable drums, some over 2 meters tall, running at extremely low pressure. You could push them in with your hand, and that's the point. They gently roll over snow, ice, and even fragile tundra without destroying it. This made the Roligon perfect for transporting supplies to remote Arctic villages, oil fields, and research stations. It could carry tens of tons of cargo where normal trucks would sink instantly. Some versions were built almost by hand, using parts from tractors, buses, and whatever else engineers could find. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. So well, in fact, that the term Roligon became a nickname for an entire category of Arctic vehicles. Sometimes the weirdest ideas are the smartest ones. And speaking of weird, the next machine looks like a train that got lost and decided to keep going anyway. The Gorokhod, sometimes called the Soviet polar crawler, is one of the heaviest tracked vehicles ever sent into frozen terrain. Built during the Cold War, this machine was designed to operate in Antarctica, the coldest place on Earth. It was based on tank technology, but transformed into a mobile base. Massive steel tracks, a boxy cabin mounted on top, and enough insulation to survive temperatures that can drop below -80 degrees. Inside, it wasn't just a driver's seat and controls. It had bunks, a kitchen, workspaces, communication equipment. This thing wasn't meant to travel for hours. It was meant to travel for weeks. Entire crews lived inside it while crossing endless white deserts. The engine was enormous, originally designed for heavy military use, but tuned down to survive long missions instead of short bursts of power. When it moved, it looked like a building crawling across the ice. Slow, loud, unstoppable. A few of these machines still exist today, restored and displayed as reminders of a time when humans were willing to send literal houses on tracks into the most hostile place on Earth. But even this monster isn't the craziest thing ever. Built for the Arctic, because the next machine wasn't just a truck. It wasn't just a crawler. It was a train, without tracks. Imagine standing on the ice and watching something longer than a football field slowly approach you. Multiple connected units. Dozens of wheels. Engines humming. This was the Overland Train Mark II, built by the United States in the late 1950s. It was designed to haul massive amounts of cargo across the Arctic without roads, railways, or ships. The lead unit generated power for electric motors mounted on wheels throughout the entire convoy. Every section moved together, bending and flexing as it crossed ice and snow. It could carry over 150 tons of supplies in a single trip. Fuel, equipment, building materials. Everything needed to support remote radar stations during the Cold War. It moved slowly, but it didn't stop. Watching archival footage of it feels unreal, like something from a science fiction movie. In the end, it was too complex and expensive to maintain. Planes eventually replaced it, but nothing like it has ever been built again. And that brings us to the final machine on this list, the largest, most ambitious, and most controversial Arctic truck ever created. And its story is one of genius, failure, and mystery, asterisk, asterisk. The final machines on this list push the line between genius and madness, and none more than the one you're about to hear about. Because this wasn't just an Arctic vehicle. It was meant to be a moving scientific city. The Antarctic Snow Cruiser. Even the name sounds heavy. Built in the late 1930s, long before modern materials or computers, this machine was designed to cross Antarctica itself. Not just the edges. The interior. The dead center of the coldest place on Earth. When it rolled out of the factory, People couldn't believe it was real. 17 meters long, almost 5 meters wide, taller than a two-story building, and weighing over 34 tons. For its time, it was unimaginable. 4 gigantic wheels, each nearly 3 meters tall, were supposed to float over snow like skis. Instead of a normal drivetrain, it used a diesel engine connected to generators, which powered electric motors at each wheel. A system decades ahead of its time. Inside it had living quarters, a lab, storage, heating, and even a small aircraft stored on the roof. The plan was simple. Drive across Antarctica. Live inside the vehicle for months. Conduct research no one had ever done before. What could go wrong? Almost everything. Once you'd reached Antarctica, the snow cruiser couldn't get traction. The tires slipped. The snow packed underneath. It struggled to move at all. After only a short distance, the expedition was forced to abandon it. The largest polar truck ever built had failed. But here's the twist. Decades later, it was rediscovered, buried under snow, still mostly intact. Then it vanished again. Somewhere beneath the Antarctic ice, it may still be there. Frozen, waiting, a ghost of human ambition. But the snow cruiser wasn't the only giant to disappear into history. During the Cold War, the Soviets created another monster that looked more like a building than a vehicle. The Kharkovchanka. This was not a truck in the traditional sense. It was a tracked fortress. Built in the late 1950s based on a heavy tank chassis, the Kharkovchanka was designed specifically for Antarctic expeditions. And unlike the snow cruiser, it worked. Massive steel tracks allowed it to crawl across ice and snow with ease. Inside, it was a full living space. Beds for the crew, a kitchen, a dining area, work desks, communication systems, everything needed to survive months of isolation. The engine was enormous, originally capable of nearly 1,000 horsepower, but tuned for reliability rather than speed. When this machine moved, it wasn't fast. But it didn't need to be. It was unstoppable. Soviet expeditions used it to reach some of the most remote locations on Earth, including the pole of inaccessibility, the point in Antarctica farthest from any coast. Imagine that. Driving a metal building to the most unreachable place on the planet. Some of these vehicles still exist today, preserved as icons of polar exploration. And even modern Antarctic vehicles borrow ideas from this design. But if you think tracked monsters are the end of the story, you're wrong, because one of the strangest Arctic machines ever built didn't use tracks or traditional wheels. It used air. The ZIL E167 screw-propelled vehicle looks like nothing else on Earth. Instead of wheels, it had 2 massive rotating cylinders shaped like screws. As they spun, the vehicle literally drilled its way across snow, ice, and swampy terrain. Designed for rescue missions, especially for recovering downed spacecraft, this machine could move where nothing else could. It didn't care about soft snow or broken ice. It just kept turning and crawling forward. Watching it move is unsettling. Like a machine that shouldn't exist. Slow, loud, and bizarre. But incredibly effective. It was never meant for long expeditions, but it proved that engineers were willing to try absolutely anything to solve Arctic mobility. And that spirit of experimentation leads us to one of the most practical giants on this list. The Swedish BV206 might not look as massive as some of the others, but don't let its size fool you. This articulated tracked vehicle has become one of the most successful Arctic machines ever built. Used by militaries, researchers, and rescue teams around the world, it's designed to move across snow, ice, and wetlands without damaging the environment. 2 connected units allow it to bend and climb over obstacles smoothly. It can float on water. It can operate in extreme cold. And it can be configured to carry troops, cargo, or medical equipment. What makes it special is its size, its balance, reliability, and the fact that it works every single time. Sometimes the best Arctic vehicles aren't the biggest. They're the ones that quietly do the job year after year. But for our list, we're not done yet, because one last machine deserves a place among the giants. A vehicle so extreme that it looks like something from a dystopian movie. The snow train. This wasn't a single vehicle, but a convoy of massive powered units linked together, designed to haul enormous loads across polar ice. Similar in concept to the Overland Train, but built for different missions. These snow trains were used to move supplies between remote stations in Antarctica. Engines roared, steel groaned, and slowly, mile by mile, these convoys crossed terrain where nothing else could survive. Today, most of them are gone, scrapped, abandoned, or buried beneath snow. But their impact remains. And now, as we reach the end of this journey, there's one question left. What do all these machines really represent? They're not just trucks. They're proof of how far humans will go to explore, survive, and conquer environments that seem impossible. From failed dreams buried under ice to unstoppable crawlers that reach the ends of the earth, these machines tell stories of risk, ambition, and raw engineering courage. And that brings us to the final part, where everything comes together and the real meaning of these Arctic giants is revealed. When you step back and look at all these machines together, something becomes very clear. None of them were built just to be big. They were built because the Arctic doesn't forgive mistakes. Out there, you don't get a second chance. And every one of these vehicles represents a different answer to the same brutal question. How do you survive when nature wants you gone? Some engineers chose size. Others chose flotation. Some went with tracks. Others trusted giant tires filled with air. And a few decided to rewrite the rules entirely. But all of them pushed human limits further into the frozen unknown. Think about the people who designed these machines. They weren't sitting in warm offices imagining perfect conditions. They were planning for engines that wouldn't start, metal that would shatter, and crews that could freeze in minutes if something failed. Every bolt mattered. Every system had to work when everything else stopped. That's why these trucks feel less like vehicles and more like living creatures. They breathe heat. They eat fuel. They protect their crews like armored shells moving through a white void. What makes these Arctic giants even more fascinating is how many of them were built during moments of global tension. The Cold War wasn't just about missiles and politics. It was about logistics, about who could reach the most remote places on Earth first. Radar stations, research bases, supply routes across frozen continents. These trucks were silent weapons in a battle fought against distance, cold, and isolation. And sometimes the enemy wasn't another nation. It was the ice itself. And then there are the machines that failed. Like the Antarctic Snow Cruiser. On paper, it was perfect, revolutionary, ahead of its time. And yet the environment exposed its flaws immediately. But here's the thing. Failure didn't make it meaningless. In fact, it made it legendary. Because every success that followed learned from that failure. Better tires, better weight distribution, better understanding of snow physics. Progress in the Arctic has always come from bold ideas. Even when they didn't work, some of these vehicles are still working today, quietly hauling supplies in places most humans will never see. Others sit in museums rusting slowly, their stories fading into history. And some are still out there, buried under snow, lost beneath ice, frozen time capsules waiting to be rediscovered decades from now. Imagine that. Somewhere beneath the Antarctic surface, a massive machine still rests exactly where it stopped, untouched, perfectly preserved by the cold. A ghost of human ambition sleeping under ice. What's even more incredible is how these machines continue to influence modern design. Today's Arctic vehicles are smarter, lighter, and more efficient. But the DNA is still there. Articulated frames, low ground pressure,